All right. So Darian, I would love to talk a little bit more about the revision process of your piece. So I would love to kind of maybe describe your experience for writing for the bass. What did you learn? You know, what was something you weren't expecting? Did you have any challenges with the process?
Yeah. So I'm a violinist, right? So I'm used to instruments being tuned in fifths, and it's always a bit of a head trip whenever I have to write for an instrument that's not tuned that way, because all of my go-to string techniques don't necessarily lay correctly on these other instruments. And then adding into that the low C extension was really uh, like tricky mentally. I remember I had to go and grab my roommate's bass and detune it, and then try and figure out like where exactly do all these chords go. So that was interesting, but kind of a fun challenge. It's always nice when there's a bit of a puzzle you have to solve as a composer.
Hmm. And in your opinion, what makes this work unique in and of itself?
Yeah. Well, I think the succinct nature of it, that's really specific to the context we're in, makes it pretty unique. I think there's a tradition of using very emotional pieces to process emotion as a performer. Like for me, if ever in high school I was angry and needed to play something, then I would play Vivaldi's Summer Storm or something like that, right? Because here's some music that's energetic, that's loud, that I can use to channel my feelings. But even then, it feels a bit removed and artificial because it's not addressing what I'm actually frustrated about. And especially after everything that June was in the United States, I felt like there was this gap in all instruments rep where there wasn't a place where these specific issues of like police brutality, of systemic racism and oppression, of lynchings and like the publication of those lynchings, there just weren't places where these things were being stated explicitly. And therefore, transitively, there wasn't a space for people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, to really channel their emotions. So I wanted to create that space because I saw that there was a need for it, and I think that makes it stand out from the rest of the rep.
Hmm. And kind of in that vein, you know, in that way, your work is very political, right? And um, do you feel like, you know, is all work that, you know, that is created in some ways, is it political? Is that a choice? Um, you know, where do you really stand on that? And I know we kind of talked about that just a little bit before, but um,
I think all art is political, even if I know within my own practice, there's kind of two schools of thought that I inhabit at the start of a piece. It's either, is this a piece for escaping and allowing an individual to process things themselves? Or is this kind of like a classroom piece where I'm trying to teach something or convey something very clearly, something that may be statistical and has a lot of data in it? But even the pieces that are for escape, it's so that at the end of the piece, the individual listening can come back into the real world and continue to do good work for society. It's not meant to imagine there's a world where there are no politics. Those pieces can only exist because I know that you're coming from a world that's heavily politically mired and going through a lot of difficulty right now.
mhm.
So I think here I'll give you a space to refresh because I know that everything feels really constant right now. With the expectation that then once you're refreshed, you're going to go back and keep doing good work.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's I think it's a very apt and very moving composition, and I think, you know, in many ways, you know, your work in general kind of deals kind of with this in a lot of different ways. You know, I mean, your work often kind of blurs the lines between song, performance art, political commentary, and concert music. So, you know, is there anything that inspired you to kind of take your artistry kind of in that multifaceted direction?
Yeah, for sure. When my degree is in music composition, right? So that's a pretty pointed set of training that lasted for a long time. But then once I was out of school, I started joining a lot of bands in San Antonio, Texas. I think I was in like 8 of them. And one of those bands, the band leader was this lady named Daniela Riojas. She's amazing. She's a photographer, a videographer, visual artist, performance artist, all these things. I remember sometimes going to her studio and seeing her weld things. Like, she's just remarkable. And I was talking to her once about having always wanted to be a photographer, but never getting into it. And she said to me, okay, cool. Well, then you have my studio space next month for second Saturday, the art block in San Antonio. If you don't do anything with it, I'm going to lose money, and the space will be unused, and it'll be a wasted resource that other people could have used. Or if you do something with it, then you'll be a photographer. And so I practiced a lot. I think I started taking like 1,000 photos a day, and then I started editing like 500 of them a day as I got closer to what I wanted to install. And then once I finally did it, once I was able to put up photography, make prints, make a video, project it on the wall opposite of me performing, and then install myself as like a performance artist for the work that I was creating that night, I think I learned a lot about how it all becomes one thing. Mm-hmm. There's a visual element to all arts. There's a sonic element to all arts. Every art is multisensory. So to really segregate it and think like, oh, I'm just a musician, I don't do anything else, is just actually impossible. Like, you're always thinking about it. That's why they want people to dress in tuxes, or why the orchestra is set up in that semicircle the way that it is. There's theatrics to it. And I think getting into that early on, like right after college, helped me a lot to feel like, oh, everything I'm creating is headed toward this one total art thing eventually. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't surprise me if more and more it gets harder to define precisely where I'm at within my medium.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of amazing, and I think it's unfortunately kind of rare where you find somebody who does all of these things, at the same time and does them all really well. And I wanted to talk about intersectionality a little bit, because you mentioned in your bio that you really want to focus toward intersectionality in your work. And so how exactly does intersectionality manifest, in your compositional process? And for those who maybe will not know, like how do you define that, for yourself in general? What is intersectionality?
Right. Well, to me, intersectionality means being able to speak to more people in the room on a personal level. On my mom's side, I'm Christian American. She's from Mexico City. On my dad's side, I'm Black. Like generations of Black people in Texas, like all the way back to slavery. And I'm also a queer man. So it's interesting because a lot of these experiences at times are at odds with each other. There's rifts between them, but also I feel like as a person who's in the center of it all, I get to reach out to each of these sections of myself and the people in those communities and be like, actually, here are the ways that we're similar. Here's how we can come together. Here's how we can all progress together. Like, there's harmony here that I'm forced to confront because I'm at the point of harmony of all of those things. And that's kind of the intersection of it, right? And I've found that applies pretty directly to what we were just talking about with being interdisciplinary or working with multiple mediums. It's like it is intersectional. And if I can pull from the visual arts or do something that feels cinematic, then maybe that's more of a point of reference that's identifiable with an audience member than doing something that references, I don't know, Tanaka's or Stockhausen. It's all about bringing people in and not creating barriers to entry just because the aesthetic is super cut off. I like the idea of intersectionality being very closely related to inclusivity. Like, because I'm in all these experiences, because I have my hands in all these mediums, I get to do things that relate to more people. And that just means that more people can be involved in the spaces I create, which is really important to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in general, it's very important for classical music because I think it's it's a very elitist, very rich white art form, at its, if you talk about just the orchestra, so, I think any effort, made to kind of tone that down and kind of break the barriers in our field is important, especially for those who may not, feel like they're a part of it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it'll only make the art better art gets better when it gets exposed to other artists, when it gets exposed to other ethnicities, when it gets exposed to other mediums and genres. I don't think there's been an example of. I think it's the way of progress. I think it's the way that we're going to move forward and make sure that classical music doesn't die. It's just by allowing diversity into it.
Yeah, I think you're very right in this. With that, I think why don't we move over to the piece proper, and we can do a little work. Okay. So why don't we talk a little bit about what this piece looked like beforehand and what it looks like now, right? So right in the beginning of this piece, I see that you've added timings, right? Because we kind of talked about having a little bit more concrete ideas about how long each of these is going to last, considering the aleatoric nature of this. So here it is with the new timings. Disintegrating. Disintegrating foundation. Disintegrating foundation under.
Right. Yeah, totally. So good.
So was that? It might have been maybe the last one felt a little long to me, but
a little bit, yeah. But it's good because at least the diminishing timestamps, right, makes it clear the propulsion of it, right? It's like, oh, good, it has momentum towards the fifth measure where you're about to get to.
Right. How did I do?
I think it's great.
Was it close?
Yeah, I think it's just always going to be, yeah. It's just always the connecting into the harmonic, right? I think like finding precisely where that is, it might even have to like land in the middle of a slur, actually.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, like I'm trying to leave space for it to just happen smoothly, but I think the most succinct thing I want to say about it would always be like it should just smoothly arrive there, kind of.
Okay.
Like I can hear you reaching for the note, I can hear you going around the note, but like it needs to feel connected to the thing that came before. Okay. Otherwise, it might be too much of a break in motion.
I'm gonna try something real quick, and let's just see what happens. So. I don't know. What do you think?
Is it closer? I think that it's going to end up not being any one thing. I think it might be something that kind of just changes measure to measure, performance to performance.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean the point is to make space for those changes. Mm-hmm. And I think in order to do that, the succinctly vague instruction is just make sure it feels connected to the thing before it. Mm-hmm. And that whatever it means in the moment is whatever it means in the moment.
Of course. Okay. All right. So I'll work on it. I'll stop being so serious about it.
Yeah.
No, just
Yeah.
yeah. Why don't we also talk about maybe the third section, or I guess is the just that
The ACAB
five here.
section.
Um,
Okay.
Because one thing that was new in this edition is kind of some more directions in terms of character and also pacing, starting at measure 10.
Right. Are you gonna try the before version or the newer version?
Oh, I'm just gonna do the most recent one.
Yeah.
And I believe we also talked about kind of having stating the first scales and the notes kind of a little bit more slowly first, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll start right at measure 8.
Sure. Yeah.
Some glad morning. Some glad morning when our lives are over, who will fly away to the home on God's celestial shore. Ooh, I didn't do it. I totally didn't do it just then. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. Okay. One more time.
And the idea is to just stick the pitch set so that it really helps the audience hear what's happening. Because I think like some of the chords are maybe just like one note changes and
Yeah.
can be really important, or it can feel like nothing happened. So like really just delineating, here's the pitch set, and then improvising within it, I think will feel more powerful structurally.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Okay. I'm just going to start right on 10 now. Okay.
Sure.
Some glad morning when our lives are over, who will fly away to that home on God's celestial shore, who will learn their way, who is in the field witnessing, who has turned away. Our friends die while they turn a blind eye. Our friends die while they antagonize. What do I do with these lungs that are filled with light? Who would fly away?
Yeah, helps a lot with the harmony for sure. I wonder, can the last one, where it says withering, I guess, can that also happen rhythmically? So it would be like a guitar, but just like really using the Intersectionality like in a rhythmic way as well. It's like, oh, there's more and more space gradually. Yeah.
Okay, let me give that a shot.
And I may put the pitch set in measure 13 of an octave.
Okay.
Or I might like add another octave to it. So it'll be like that one plus the same thing, but up an octave.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Do you want me to try that then? Do you want to hear it? Or...
Yeah. You can try it from like 12, I guess.
Sure.
If you want.
Cool. Who is in the field witnessing? Who has turned away? Our friends die while they turn a blind eye. Our friends die while they antagonize. What do I do with these lungs that are filled with life? Who could fly away?
Interesting. Yeah. I like the register thing for sure.
Yeah,
Well,
that seems really
that.
cool. I can work on that rhythmic diminuendo a little bit more to make it a little sound, I think, better than that.
I think, well, and maybe the trick is just that maybe it shouldn't have constancy, actually. I think this is the thing I could just write in the score. But, like, maybe think of it as, like, there are actually going to start being rests between groups of notes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it really feels like it disintegrates, maybe.
Okay.
But at a kind of irregular rate.
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of like almost like you said, like adding rest. So like maybe like the tempo of the notes doesn't necessarily change, but we're just kind of adding more space in between them.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
And maybe sometimes it's a bit of both. But I think what could be cool about that is that the vocal line, in a weird way, shifts towards being like very, very much the focus of that part, you know. Whereas in everything else, it's interesting because like the rhythmic activity of the bass makes it feel like it's the main thing happening, even though there's actually melody on top. Whereas in this, it's like, well, that main thing starts to disintegrate, foundation disintegrating. And so you can really focus on the line being sung. That can be the through line. That'll feel like it has constancy to it, while this other thing is just breaking apart.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well that sounds great. Do you I can give that another shot if you.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just one bar, like just 15.
I'm sorry, the B. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
What do I do with these lungs that are filled with life? Who could fly away?
Yeah, that's closer.
Okay, I think I'll get there. I just need to do a couple.
But how does it feel to play?
It feels fine. I think it's that the two things at once where I'm just introducing kind of a slightly newer variation, so my brain has to just get used to it. But I don't think it should be a problem. Yeah, it's what always happens to me is
It's a hard passage. Sure.
oh yeah. It's tricky. Luckily, I think the vocal line is more or less reasonable, so it kind of helps me a little bit that way. What I think works so well about this section is that we have this erratic motion in the bass, and you'd think that there's so much to keep track of, and to a certain extent there is.
Yeah.
But what's nice is that Darian doesn't actually have really specific rhythms that are notated for the song on the top step. So it kind of gives me a little bit of freedom to just sing it naturally while focusing kind of more on the randomized pitch sets that kind of like helps me do that a little bit more effectively. And I think it's a really successful way of notating that. So for all those composers out there looking to do something like this is how you do it.
Thanks.